All right, hello everyone. This is Group 2. We are presenting Chapter 8, Impasses, Strikes, and Dispute Resolution. I'm Nate Marchand.
I'm Dylan Close.
I'm Jeff Bennett.
I'm Emma Warrior.
I'm Chelsea Grilly.
And I'm Kayla Allison.
All right, so Chapter 8 summary, the first part. Types of strikes. There are a few different types of strikes. I put 3 of the big ones on here. So an economic strike, the goal is to win better wages, benefits, or change certain work rules that employees don't like. A lockout is an employer initiated, and workers cannot return to work until they agree to different terms. The third one is unfair labor practice strikes, and it's a strike to protest employers' unfair labor practices. So some of the legal treatments that go with strikes, there's a lot of them, but just to name some of the main ones. So economic and unfair labor practice strikes are protected by Section 7 of the NLRA. Something that most people don't know, though, is workers can still be fired if they're going on strike. And then almost all strikes are illegal when they are being conducted by government employees. So anybody working for a government agency, they are not allowed to go on strike because they are considered a vital source.
The next part of the chapter talks about strike replacements and other pressure tactics. So there's 2 types of strike replacements. There's permanent and temporary. The replacements are notified when they come to work whether they're going to be permanent or temporary, and this decides whether strikers are going to be able to assume their job position when they're done with their strike. An example of this in the book was the McKay Radio Company. They had in San Francisco, they had a bunch of employees go on strike. It only lasted 4 days. It wasn't very successful, but when strikers wanted to come back to work, there were 5 employees that did not have their job because of permanent replacements. And they went to court over this, and the court ruled that the replacements could keep their job and the strikers could be fired, but the strikers were on a priority recall list whenever a job opening came with the company. Some other pressure tactics, boycotts. It's when employees encourage their businesses' consumers to quit doing business with the company. And secondary boycotts are when the employees encourage consumers to stop doing businesses with associated businesses that work with their company. Secondary boycotts were deemed illegal by in the National Labor Relations Act. The next one is work slowdowns. This is basically where employees do whatever they can to just lower productivity and increase costs for the business. One example of this is work to rule campaign, where employees basically go by every single rule that is in place. This could be big with safety rules where they have to go through and check machines, something that they may not do all the time. And again, it just really slows down productivity and costs the company money. And the last one is corporate campaigns, where unions basically try to get external support and apply pressure on their company. This can be done by pressuring board members or politicians, just anyone that could have a big influence on the company to push their own agenda.
So the third-party dispute resolutions include strikes, lockouts, and corporate campaigns. There are 3 major types of these party disputes, and that includes mediation, arbitration, and fact-finding. So mediation is a dispute resolution process in which a neutral third party, which would be the mediator, it helps negotiate or avoid any impasses by reaching an agreement. Mediators do not have to wait for an impasse to occur, and strikes and arbitrators have to. During a mediation, there is a meeting between the union and management to negotiate, and the 3 stages include setting the stage, where the mediator gathers background information and sets the rules of the meeting. The mediator also will establish trust from both parties. And then the second stage would be problem solving. So that's when they talk through the issue and they try to come up with solutions. And then the third stage is achieving a workable agreement, which is when they give each party encouragement to reach a settlement. And then interest arbitration revolves disputes by having a neutral third party arbitrator issuing a settlement that is binding on the employer's union and employees. This resolves interest disputes that result in a new contractual terms governing wages in terms and conditions of employment. And there are two primary forms, which include conventional arbitration, which is the arbitrator is not constrained in deciding the settlement terms. An example of this would be the employer is arguing for an increase in wages, but the employees want to try to increase the wages to be even higher. And then there's the final offer arbitration, which is the total package final offer. So that's when the arbitrator must select one of the parties' final offers on all of the negotiations for the contract. And then there's an issue by issue final offer, which is when they choose either the party's final offer on an issue by issue basis. And this is more fair and both parties are heard. And then fact finding is a method which investigates the issues and they make recommendations to come to a settlement. So this allows both sides to make their case, and it helps in three different ways. It sets a list of unbiased terms. It lets union members or management make decisions based off of the facts, and the publicity of releasing these facts can push union members or management to come to an agreement. So out of these three methods, which one works the best? So it depends on the situation, and it depends on what is going on to find the best method. The best thing to do is to have resolution systems that involve trade-offs. And then strikes and lockouts are very inefficient and very costly to everyone in the workforce. So it affects employees, employers, and the public. And then fact-finding lacks control over negotiating and the outcome of the solution. And the ultimate goal is to put pressure on the negotiators to reach a settlement.
So I did ethics and action strike replacements or scabs, and this was just summarizing the case study. So in 1987 and 1988, workers represented by United Paperworks International Union were on strike for 17 months, demanding significant recessions. And they were receiving record high profits and refused to share financial records with the union. So the union had no choice but to strike. And then the president of the union was very upset with what was happening, and everyone could see the strike coming. The pay was unfair and the workers deserved way more. And the companies did not want to give more money to the workers, so they hired replacement workers and they ended up taking their jobs, and it kind of messed up the regular workers. They didn't get their.
So for the case study questions, the first one is it ethical for a company to use permanent strike replacements? So I would say that permanent strike replacements are extreme, but can be necessary to keep like the company afloat. With no labor, the company could shut down altogether, leading to more lost jobs, which would be considered unethical. People are trying to get the best that they deserve, no matter the situation. People have jobs for a reason, to be able to provide for themselves and their families, and to be permanently replaced is the worst thing that could happen in such an instance. And based on temporary strike replacements, they're more ethical than the permanent ones, although it could result in some loss of jobs, as the temporary workers could replace some of the previous permanent workers. It results in less job loss, and the company is still able to continue making profits. So for case study question 2, is it ethical for individuals to cross picket lines and become temporary or permanent strike replacements? When people cross picket lines, joining in on the replacements is ultimately doing what's best for them. The question of ethics can be looked at from different points of view, and that's what it comes down to. The rest of the people on strike, it may look as though the person doesn't care, but in reality, being away from your job for so long has more harmful effects than it could gain from protesting. And for the third question, Is it ethical for unions and their supporters to attack strike replacements as scabs and try to prevent them from crossing the picket lines? Well, I would say that it's unethical to attack anyone based on such nonviolent circumstances. There's no reason to attack or call someone names because they are choosing to put themselves first over the strike. This goes hand in hand with the previous question, as anyone who crosses the picket line is going back to a job and could be for countless reasons, but wanting to be able to support themselves and their potential family is reason enough to justify. Preventing someone from crossing isn't actually helping the cause, as it could create more hostility and things can get out of hand.
Okay. So, my YouTube video is about strikes and lockouts, and I did a little summary. If a deadlock is in the collective bargaining can't be resolved, that may lead to a strike or even a lockout. A lockout is when management shuts down the company's operations to prevent the union workers from working. A strike is when the union workers refuse to work in order to put pressure and fear on the employer. And then some types of strikes is economic, unfair labor practices, wildcat, jurisdictional, and sympathy.
If a deadlock in the collective bargaining process cannot be resolved, an employer may revert to a lockout or a union may revert to a strike. Let's take a look. In a lockout, management shuts down company operations to prevent union members from working. This action may avert possible damage or sabotage to the company's facilities or injury to employees who continue to work. It also gives management leverage in negotiations. During a strike, union members refuse to work in order to put pressure on the employer. Often, the striking union members picket or demonstrate against the employer outside the place of business by carrying placards and signs. 5 types of strikes can occur. An economic strike, where the parties fail to reach agreement during collective bargaining. Unfair labor practice strikes, where union members leave their jobs over what they feel are illegal employer actions, such as refusal to bargain. A wildcat strike occurs during the life of the collective bargaining agreement without approval from union leadership and violates a no-strike clause in a labor contract. Strikers can be discharged or disciplined. Jurisdictional strikes, where members of one union walk out to force the employer to assign work to them instead of members of another union. And sympathy strikes, where unions choose to express support for another union involved in a dispute, even though the first union has no disagreement with the employer. Many unions are reluctant to go on strike because of the financial losses their members would incur over the fear the strike would cause the employer to go bankrupt. In addition, management has shown a willingness to hire replacements, and some strikes have ended with union workers losing their jobs.
And then for the discussion questions, I did what can be negotiating collective bargaining, which is they can negotiate the contracts with their employers to determine the terms of the employment, including pay, benefits, hours, leave, job health, and safety policies. And then we did how do you ask negotiation questions? And when you're negotiating, you gain information and don't assume anything. You should check for understanding and interest level and then determine the behavioral style. And the last one is for you guys to do in the discussion post. Which element do you think is most important when developing a strike contingency plan and why? And that's the end of our presentation.